an important thing to say, but I thought you were going to give me the answer. So we're looking at two different building types. One is a high-rise, tall urban building, and the other one is a low-rise office park. And there's similar kinds of components on each of these buildings, but there's one major component that is a huge, it's going to, you would say that's going to be a much larger heat loss on the low-rise office park versus the tall urban building, because they have so much more of this particular component.
I want to take a guess and talk about the roof area.
Perfect answer. Absolutely correct. If we look at the urban building, we have a roof area right here. And remember from our calculations that we said that the heat loss was relative to the temperature differential, the difference between the inside and the outside. And all of these floors, we could assume that the same temperature. So we don't have any heat loss from floor to floor. We'll have it through the roof. But one of the other uh, um, elements in that formula was the area. So this roof has a very little area, and these roofs have a much greater area. So that's the perfect example, and that's the kind of thing that I'm happy to hear that you picked up on. And it's just absolutely clear that there's a big difference, many differences here, but the big one is the roof. You're going to lose a lot of energy through the roof relative to uh, in this campus relative to this single high-rise building. So if we take a look at it, what we have here is that both buildings are approximately the same area. The floor size is about 30,000 to 36,000 square feet for um, the campus, but this one has a lot more of the individual floors in the one building, and this one has the same amount of floors, but it's spread over 10 buildings, okay? So here's the answer to the question that I asked that was successfully answered, is that the area of the roof here, remember that's one of the components, one of the variables in the formula for heat loss is A for area. And this is a much smaller area than there is here. And then the 10 building campus has a little bit more square footage on the walls, but remember that's another A for area calculation. And then the last thing we're going to look at is just the square footage of the parking. You know, in an urban building, most people don't drive there. They'll take mass transit or walk, um, or some other source of transportation that doesn't require a lot of square footage for parking. And so these buildings, these tall high-rise buildings, sometimes don't even provide an area for parking. You know, when we compare the two, we've got a big 1,000,008 square feet of parking area for the small, the low-rise building, and we have 0 square feet for the high-rise building. Okay, so if we take a look at just one building, this is a different energy model, but we can see the total amount of energy that that building is using versus the total amount that one of these buildings is using, because it's a lower, has a much lower, one single building has a much lower wall area, okay, than the wall area for this building. So if we're just comparing one building to one building, we can see that, you know, this is not going to have as much energy consumption than this entire building is. But the comparison really that I want to make here, because we're working with the building operations, okay? So if we take a look at the amount of call it energy that went into the materials, it's the blue area, and it's a little bit more for the low rise, low density building, but not a lot. And then when we compare the energy consumption, if you take a look at those two, you know, it's more, obviously it's more for the low rise buildings. But because most of the people are taking transportation, mass transportation, the actual energy consumed for transportation is much more efficient for a building of approximately the same size than it is for basically we're looking at a suburban office building complex. So although we're focusing on the kind of the green area, The other area that we really need to be focusing on, of course, is the red, which is the transportation. And if any of you live in suburbia, not Long Island, and not New Jersey, because they do have good mass transportation, but many suburbs, including the one that I live in West Bloomfield, Michigan, you know, not only do we not have any kind of bus service or mass transportation, but many of the communities in Michigan have refused to participate. They won't contribute any money to a mass transportation system. And when you have many communities who refuse to participate, you're not going to have a successful transportation system. And I marvel at the New York, the Manhattan, Brooklyn, even the New Jersey transportation systems are phenomenal. I really, really do have a great impression of it. Now, and you people who've lived here all your life might take it for granted and be a little upset when subway's a couple minutes late. But you know, to me, that is a system that works very, very nicely and very quickly. So Professor Bobker and Professor Yoon and myself have been teaching this class for many years, and we're looking at the internal combustion engine uh, result for adding carbon into the environment. And this, of course, is changing. Now, when we first started teaching this class, yeah, there were Teslas out there, but it wasn't a very big market share. There wasn't a lot of Teslas out there. When you saw one on the street, you go, wow, there's a Tesla. Now it's like, yeah, there's another Tesla. Um, but as Professor Bobker said before, the internal combustion engine is burning the fuel at the site, which is the car. And the Tesla is burning the fuel at the source, which is the plant that actually generates the electricity. But you're still burning fossil fuels. And as this class progresses from semester to semester to semester, there's going to be a bigger and bigger share of this is going to be produced, number one, the transportation is going to be using renewable resources, electricity for sure, and it's going to be produced in a environmentally friendly way. There's more and more car companies now are coming out. Mercedes has a phenomenal new line, the EQ line of electric vehicles, and if you want to see a Tesla killer, go look at the EQS. And I say it's a Tesla killer, but it's really not in terms of market share. Well, in terms of numbers sold, Tesla's going to still keep selling a lot of cars, but they might lose some of the market share. But the market itself is going to grow. So if you think about Tesla taking 90% of 1,000,000 cars a year, when it goes to 2,000,000 cars a year, they might only take 50%. But 50% of 2,000,000 is a lot more than 90% of 1,000,000. So their numbers probably go up, but their market share might go down. But that's great because they have more people driving the electric vehicles, which is real. And then there's, of course, being from the Motor City, I should mention the Mustang, the new electric Mustang, which is getting really, really good reviews as well. So this is another target. You know, we're looking here and we're looking here to try to save some energy, but hopefully somebody else is looking, and they are, at these numbers. And I just want to make a comparison on the energy that you could possibly save if you save 50% of this energy and no one's paying attention to this. We're not really doing what we're hoping to do, which is reduce the carbon dioxide in the expelled into the environment. So just to sum this up real quickly, we have diesel buses and 20 passengers bringing people here. And here we have the private car getting 15 miles per gallon and one passenger per car. Now, again, as I said, things change. Now we're not driving necessarily that much anymore because there's really no place to go. You can go to the grocery store, you can go to the convenience store, but restaurants and bars and nightclubs and theaters and all of that. So these numbers are definitely changing right now, but they'll likely come back. So before I move on, I just wanted to show, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about relative to the energy that you're going to try to save. in comparison to the energy that's the total energy that's being used in order to occupy that building in terms of the transportation is the big target. Does anybody have a comment to make or a thought or an idea about this before we move on to the next topic? So nobody wants to even say, oh, wow, I never realized that. Or, yeah, I knew that. Why, what are you telling us about this? We're trying to deal with energy on a building and you're telling us about cars. Well, what, no one has a comment?
Surprise. I have a comment after Jessica goes.
What about high-rise buildings with that do have garage parking?
Well, that's a good question. And some of the high-rise buildings do in fact have garage parking. But it's still so much more convenient and it's still so much less expensive. You can pay 500 to several $1,000s a month to be able to park your car in that high-rise building. You know, even the really high earners might think twice about that. But what I like is I can jump on for a couple of bucks. I can jump on the subway in Brooklyn and get all the way up to City College for a couple of dollars, and there's no way I can get up there that fast from Brooklyn in my car. And then I got to worry about parking once I get up there. So yeah, your commute, if you're going to have more and more people, if you make it more and more convenient for people to park their cars, then and they can afford the fees to park their car, then the high-rise building that has parking inside of it or convenient parking close by, some of the people are going to opt out of the mass transit and go back over to the private car. And right now, you can't really blame them, can you? We're talking about the virus, for example. It's much safer, I believe, to drive your car than it is to get on a crowded. Well, I don't even know if the subways are crowded right now. Does anybody have any experience with the subways? Are they still crowded?
Depending on the time of the day and the route, it can be crowded. Yes.
There, when I take the subway, there's one. I like to watch the people and try to figure out, what their life story is and everything. And there's always been one crowd of people that I very rarely see on the subway, wherever I'm going. I see just about every category of people, but the people I call the cufflink crowd. And I very rarely actually see anybody wearing cufflinks on the subway. If you have cufflinks, you're getting around some other way, or you're not getting on the same subways that I'm getting on. So anyway, is it Elvis? You wanted to jump in?
All right, all right, Professor Bright. I think I'm gonna have to start wearing cufflinks. But all right. Beside that, I think this is another one of that I think is very underappreciated. The way you lay it out, I think it's very concise. Because I personally feel like transportation and buildings are two sides of the same coin. Now, right now, I work on buildings. I work in real estate, but I was very, very close to working on transportation consulting, and because to me, they're really two sides of the same coin. And to illustrate that, there's a couple of things I want to point out. So I think a lot of you guys are very familiar with the LEED building standard, which is one of the leading green building certification standards. And in LEED, there's a significant amount of points, to your certification regarding the site selection. And you have to do occupant surveys to see what percentage of your building occupants, how they get to your building. If enough building occupants, arrive at your building in their daily commute with mass transportation or walking or bicycling, you're going to get more points. So, LEED recognizes this fact that, there's a connection between, not just the building energy consumption, but the transportation aspect. So I do want to point that out. Mass transit is a, more complicated issue, but for those of you in the sustainability program, you know that there is a sustainable transportation class which Professor Bryce and I have both taken. A lot of interesting thoughts there, but I do want to point out that, it's very, very important correlated.
Yep, I totally agree. There's some conversation about electric vehicles in the chat area, and there is one one country in Scandinavia that has already achieved a 50% uh, saturation of electric cars in their country. And one of the reasons is, of course, the subsidies. There's or there was when I looked into it, no value added tax. So if you want to buy $100,000 Mercedes, you're going to pay another $20,000 for VAT. But if you want to buy a $100,000 electric car, you don't have to pay the VAT. That's a big incentive right there, aside from the credits that you get. And then when I was studying it, you could also drive, if you had an electric vehicle, you could drive in on certain highways where other cars could not. You could drive in the bus lanes. And when you got to the downtown, you got to park for free. So there was a lot of incentivization. And if of course, we paid more respect to the electric vehicle, similar to what Tesla does, and a few more are now, we might see a larger percentage. But the thing is that, we're not staying the same. Your generation is going to have a much higher percentage of electric vehicles than my generation did. And that's because you're going to be more interested in the sustainable and environmental impact of your car. And, you're just going to think it's the right way to get around. And there's going to be more and more offerings for that. So, if we incentivize the electric vehicle, that's one end of the equation, but we also have to pay attention to how are we generating that electricity. And right now it's still a mess, but that doesn't mean that it's not changing for the better. Okay. And it'll change for the better in your generation as you progress through your career.
So Bob, I'm gonna jump on the two things. Everything you just said. I think Sadi pointed out it was Norway, and I remember you telling me that story, and it was Oslo. I think I only learned that from you. So, like on the electric vehicle part, it's the same thing. On LEED, there is a credit if you install EV charging stations, at your building site. So that's also LEED credit. So once again, LEED recognizes that, and the other thing is that if you further procure green power for your building, for example, to connect to your your EV station, that's also a credit. So I think this is as someone who works in buildings, you can't for neglect and forget this impact of the grid versus your building, because they're two sides of the same coin.
For Professor Bobker, I taught a couple of classes to the chiefs of the major buildings in Manhattan. And I'm talking about the biggest buildings, the greatest size and scale buildings in Manhattan themselves. And one of the questions that I asked the chiefs, the ones that operate the systems in these huge buildings, I said, why are your owners, who I believe are really only interested in profits, and this goes to something Jessica and I were speaking about during the office hour, is that that investors want to make the most amount of money that they can, often without concerns about the environment. But I asked the chiefs, I said, why are your owners so interested in jumping through all of the hoops that are required to make their buildings LEED certified? And their answer to a person was, many major corporations in the country have in their bylaws that they must, if they're going to rent office space, they must rent a LEED certified in a LEED certified building. And now the major corporations, those are the people that pay the highest rents. Those are also the people that don't move out, or go out of business. So there are, especially I'm speaking mostly to Jessica right now, but to the class as well, there are many incentives for the environment that also pay huge dividends. Who do you want to be the tenants in your commercial spaces or your office buildings? You want the major corporations, because they pay their rent on the first of the month. They don't miss their payments, and they don't move out. Okay, so you have long-term tenants. So there are some financial advantages for lead, and I thought that was a very interesting answer, which I never even considered. Okay, so
I have
go
a
ahead.
question. May I? I'm just wondering because there's a lot of initiatives trying to find incentives for buildings to have these charging stations on their premises. However, I guess it's a little early or premature to start accounting on how much energy consumption these charging stations will reflect on their electrical bill. Like, what's the cost for the building to have these charging stations? Because that can be maybe something that they will consider and maybe not have as something they would, want to incur on more expenses.
Well, I don't believe the building owners pay for that electricity. I believe that there is generally there's a membership fee to join, and then there's a cost per kilowatt hour of energy that you use. Tesla even charges for their electricity now. That early on you could get electricity for life for your car. That was free energy, but that's been gradually scaled down and ramped down. And so, it's really not a cost, as far as I know, to the office, the building owners. It's a benefit, because also if you have that opportunity, and the president of the company that's looking for office space sees that he can charge his car all day long in his garage space your building, then that might give you the advantage to actually get that person as a tenant. Now, I don't think anybody's going to say, I'm not going to rent in that building because they have charging spaces, and it's not a cost to the office or the building owner. It's probably a profit center, but not a great profit center. So
Yeah, I'm going to concur with what Professor Bright just said, because our buildings run into that issue. I don't think it's an issue on the building. Well, for now, it's more of a grid issue, because what you're concerned about isn't the actual kilowatt hours consumed. It's the kilowatts of demand, how much power you use. Because if you're charging at a very high voltage, at a high power, high wattage, that's going to increase your demand charges. And um, I think it's really more of a grid issue. And because like we showed in Texas, if you have too much power demand and the grid can't fulfill it, that's an issue. So Con Ed under the New York City grid, they charge you very much based on how much. Not majority of our electric charge isn't on the quantity of electricity consumed; it's the power. How many kilowatts are you drawing at peak in every month? So because you're charging these batteries, that's one issue with the electric cars is how quickly you can charge them, right? When you fill up with gasoline, it's very quick. When you charge a battery, it takes more time. If you have a higher power, higher wattage, you charge faster, right? But then that's very tough on the grid. So that's really a grid issue. And everything that Professor Bright just said about the chief engineers at all these large commercial buildings, that's exactly it. I mean, that's conversations we have with our chief engineers. And a lot of the major corporations you have talk about have lead. And in fact, New York City, the government is one of the largest tenants in the city. Of course, they need a lot of space. They required all the office that the city of New York leases to be used to be LEED Silver, now it's LEED Gold. And at the federal level, the GSA is starting to look into that sort of thing as well. So when you have both public and private sector looking for this sort of things, you're going to get people's attention.
we can talk a little bit about demand, because maybe not everybody fully understands that. But imagine, let's use gasoline as an example, and that you have a gasoline operated car, and you go in and fill it up once a month. So and your car holds 30 gallons. So you pay the regular $3 per gallon for the gas, but then you pay for the quantity of gas again as a demand charge. So you might pay another $100 because you pulled 30 gallons of gas at one time. If you went back to that gas station every day and put 1 gallon of gas in your car, you wouldn't have a demand charge you would just have the cost of the gasoline. So when you have all of these charging stations and all of these other electrical draw situations, you're not just paying for the per kilowatt hour, as Professor Yoon said, but there's also a formula for the quantity over, it might be a 15-minute period of electricity that you actually drew. And I saw, I don't know if this is true, but I saw a headline or something like that that said one guy in Texas during that storm got after the storm was over, he got a $17,000 bill for electricity based on the demand charge, not the actual electricity that he used. And that's a homeowner for one short storm. So demand charges can be really are very important, and you want to understand that and sometimes the building owners will actually during certain parts of the day actually run a generator to make electricity rather than, and so that reduces the quantity of electricity that they're buying, and it's cheaper for them to run the generator, although it costs more per kilowatt hour for the electricity created by a generator, that they can reduce the peak load or the demand load on their buildings. And so the Tesla Powerwalls is another good example of that, where you can buy your electricity at night from the utility companies, and then during the day when the peak load demand charge is in effect, you can take your electricity from your Powerwall. So there's a lot of workarounds, of course, and changes to the peak load and demand load. Many people are trying to reduce that as much as possible. So anyway, any other questions about electricity, peak load, electrical cars, transportation to and from the buildings as far as energy consumption goes? Okay, so we want to get back into the psychrometric chart. And I want to just talk about that a little bit. It's very intimidating when you look at it for the first time, but it's really not that complex once you understand that these lines are representing mathematical formulas. And all they are is just taking those mathematical formulas and putting them in a graphic presentation so that we can extrapolate the information that we want easier than actually doing the mathematical formulas. So we'll talk briefly about a couple of things that I want to mention here. But we have the dry bulb temperature, which is given on the psychrometric chart. And that's the actual temperature. We're not taking into consideration anything else other than what's the actual temperature in that space. And then we'll jump down. Well, we have the dew point temperature, which is at some point in time, as you cool air that has moisture in it, that air can no longer contain that moisture and it becomes visible. So for example, if you have windows, for example, are a really good example there. You say you have a high quantity of moisture inside of your building. If it's your house, you're cooking, you're boiling water, you're taking showers, watering the plants, doing all kinds of things that create moisture inside of your building. But the temperature inside of your building is comfortable. It's a high dry bulb temperature, so it's the moisture, the air is able to contain all of the moisture that you have. But as that air travels towards your windows, which we know are a bad insulator, that it doesn't do a good job of, if you've ever gone up to the window of your house and touched the actual glass, you'll notice that it's much colder. It's often way much colder than other surfaces in your house. And what that does is that temperature, that reduction in temperature, that coldness on the surface of the window reduces the temperature of the air to the point where the air can no longer hold the moisture, and therefore the moisture becomes visible. And so that's the dew point temperature, where moisture condenses out of the air. And so fortunately, I was able to cue this example this morning. If anybody got up early enough this morning and looked out their window, we saw what? There's a lot of fog out there, right? A lot of moisture had the air was no longer able to contain all of the moisture, and we got to see a lot of moisture in the air until as the day progressed, what happened? The temperature raised up, the moisture was able to contain all, the air was able to control all of the moisture. And so then the relative humidity is really what I want to talk about today. And I'm almost done. I'm going to pass the baton on to Professor Yoon very shortly. But this is another component that the psychrometric chart can tell you what we have. And the relative humidity is really, it's the percentage or degree of saturation of the air with water. And it's the ratio of the amount of water vapor to the amount of water vapor it can actually hold. And that has a relationship to temperature. So the warmer the air is, the more moisture it can hold without you seeing the moisture. And the cooler that same volume of air is, with the same amount of moisture in it, the cooler that gets, it's not going to be able to hold all of that moisture. And so what happens is it becomes visible. We see it on our window pane, or you might actually have a glass of iced tea with a bunch of ice cubes in it in the summertime in your house, and the surface of the glass is very cold from the ice cubes, and the air touches that glass, and what happens? What do we see? We've got condensation on the outside of the glass. Again, the air that's touching the glass has been cooled down, and the air can't hold that moisture anymore, so it becomes visible to us. Okay, so that's a couple of the things that I wanted to talk about. And each one of those lines represents something different. So we have lines of constant absolute humidity. Okay, so our absolute humidity is constant. It's a horizontal line. It's always constant. This axis is your absolute humidity in the psychrometric chart, and we have constant. And here we have lines of constant dry bulb temperature. Okay, so as we go to the right, the temperature increases. As we go to the left, the temperature decreases of the dry bulb temperature, which is just the actual temperature. But if you're looking at if you're looking at a straight line here, it's a constant. This is all the same temperature. Wherever that line exists on this psychrometric chart, that's the temperature. Okay. And then we have lines of constant wet bulb temperature. Those are the diagonal lines that you're going to see. And then we have lines of constant relative humidity. And those are that's not a straight formula. It's a formula that has some geometry to it as well, or I think that might be correct to say, but it has some squares in it and on the numbers and so that's just plotting it out like that. So if we take a look at what's going on here, if I showed you on a quiz or an exam, and I showed you a line that was going horizontal like that, and I asked you what that might be, you would say that it's sensible heating and cooling, okay, because I have another line going this way, at a constant absolute humidity. So you see how it's always this, the temperature is going to change because we're going to look at what the temperature is down here. So the temperature is going up, but we have this line going across, which is telling us the absolute humidity, and it's constant. So we come over to the next one, and I showed you a line that was just going straight up. We would say the humidity is increasing, absolute humidity is increasing, and we have a constant dry bulb temperature because wherever we look on this line and project it down to here, the temperature is exactly the same. So here, the next one is an example, absolute humidity going down like that. Okay, so we have a constant dry bulb temperature because wherever we project that line down to here, the temperature is the same, but we're dehumidifying because our absolute humidity is decreasing. And I hope that kind of makes sense to you. And then if we have two vectors, one going in one direction and one going in another, the resultant of that would be this vector. And we can say that we're dehumidifying and heating. Why? Well, the absolute humidity vector is going down, and the heating is going this way, is going up. Okay, so we're dehumidifying, our absolute humidity is going, and this vector is the resultant of those two vectors. Okay, and here, what are we doing? Well, we have a vector that's going this way, and we have a vector that's going this way, and the resultant is here. So what's going on here? we have, as we go this way, we have, we're humidifying because that vector is going up like that. And this vector over here is our dry bulb temperature, but we're talking about the wet bulb temperature here, which I haven't really talked about. And I'm not really going to get into that too much. But if we were talking about the dry bulb temperature, we would be turning the temperature down and we would be increasing the humidity. Okay. And then I'm going to talk about this one just a little bit more later on in the chart, and I'm almost done, so bear with me. But if we take what's going on, this line is representing the dry bulb temperature is decreasing. At some point, that dry bulb temperature is going to hit 100% relative humidity and our moisture is going to appear. So what this guy is showing is, okay, we want to get the moisture out of the air, turn the temperature down, and get the moisture out of the air, and then you can turn the temperature back up after you've gotten the moisture out of it to whatever temperature you want. So I'm going to do a quick example here. And if you're given two answers, two givens for the variables, like let's say I gave you the dry bulb temperature, you would follow across the chart until you found that temperature and actually draw a line right up, because this is a given dry bulb temperature. It's not saying it's changing, it's given, so it's a solid temperature all the way up, okay? And the next piece of information I might be giving you is the given wet bulb temperature. And I didn't explain that because I'm really pressed for time here. I want to get you into Open Studio. So now,
Bob, please, I think this is a very important topic. So I think we're doing very well on time. So I would, I'd rather you do justice and cover everything because I think this is such an important topic for, cooling, of course.
All right. So the wet bulb temperature has it measures the effect of evaporative cooling on the actual measuring device. So if you think about it, if you have moisture on your arm in the summertime and you spin your arm around, the moisture is going to evaporate and it's going to cool your arm down. So it's a relationship of the wet bulb temperature measures the effect of the relative humidity and evaporative cooling, because we wrap a moist object around, say, a thermometer and then spin that in the air. And now we're able to calculate what the relative humidity is, as well as the dry bulb temperature at the same time. So that's kind of what we're talking about in wet bulb temperature. I'm not asking you to memorize any of these terms or any of these terminologies. I'm only giving them to you to explain what are the elements that you can extract when given two of these pieces of information. You can extract all of these other pieces of information from the psychrometric chart. So, all right, so I'm telling you that this is my wet bulb temperature. Draw a straight line across, because notice, remember that line is a diagonal line. Where those two intersect, that's where we can extract the rest of the information from. So we go down to the next one. And if I wanted to know what the absolute humidity was, I've got my given wet bulb temperature. It's following these diagonal lines. I found the correct number that was given to me. I've drawn a straight line across. I've been given the dry bulb temperature. I go across the bottom and I find the temperature, and it's a constant temperature. So I line it up. And now where those two lines intermeet, I can come over to this side and find out what's my absolute humidity, for example. And then we go to the next one. I can come over here and I can find out what my dew point temperature is. I know what my absolute humidity is. I know what moisture content I have, and I can find out if I lower this temperature all the way over to here, I'm going to see with these givens for my conditions of the air and the moisture in the air, I can tell you exactly where water is going to become obvious, because it's 100% right here. And then I can just project that down and there's the temperature, okay? So in this example, if I reduce the temperature from the dry bulb temperature from here down to here, moisture is going to appear. And if I wanted to know, well, what temperature do I have to reduce this condition down to get the moisture out of the air? Well, I just draw a line straight across here. Bam. I've got that information, and then I come down to the bottom and I see what that temperature is. And I say, okay, reduce the temperature. So that's the other one. And then let's see. Well, enthalpy is a very wonderful word in my favorite word vocabulary. I just think it just sounds really, really good. So if we go back up again now and we talk about enthalpy, well, it's the heat content in moist air, and it represents a combination of both latent and sensible heat. And if you want to know what the heck is sensible heat, it's heat that causes only the change in temperature of a substance, okay? And latent heat is heat that causes the change in state of a substance. So if I heat water up from 40 degrees to 50 degrees, it's not going to change to steam, and it's not going to change to ice. It's just going to change the temperature. But if I heat water up enough to change the state, what's going to happen then is it might turn into either a liquid or a solid, okay? So change of state, we'll go over that later on because there's some really wonderful things that happen that we take advantage of both in heating and cooling in our day-to-day life that is based on change of state. So the last slide that I want to show you real quickly here is just this one. And so we're looking, we're starting at point A, we're going to point B, and then we're going back to point C. So let's see what happens here. Well, I'm at a particular temperature right here. It looks like between 80 and 85 degrees. And I'm reducing the temperature down, right? Because what's happening here? As this line goes down this way, the temperature is reducing this way, okay? So I'm going to reduce the temperature of that air. And as I do, the relative humidity becomes greater and greater and greater and greater. Why? Because relative humidity is the percentage, it's the ratio of the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere to the amount of water vapor it can hold at a particular temperature, okay? So the temperature is very important about the air to find out how much water can it actually hold. So that's the relative humidity. And what we've done here is we said we have too much humidity in the air. Let's get that humidity out, not by actually taking the moisture out of it mechanically. Let's simply reduce the temperature of the air from this temperature to this temperature. And as we do that, we'll be able to get the moisture out of the air when we reach the saturation point, okay? And then after we've gotten the moisture out of the air, well, we want to heat it back up again now because we want it to be at a comfortable spot, the sweet spot in your facility. So does that make sense? Air is only going to hold so much moisture depending on the temperature. As you reduce the temperature, it's not going to be able to hold the same amount of moisture. At some point in time, that moisture is going to become apparent. In this particular example, it's going to become apparent right here. Once it becomes apparent, we just separate it from the air, and then we heat that air back up to a good temperature, and we're comfortable with less humidity in the space. Okay. So any questions before we move on? Okay. So I was speaking with Jessica.
I had a question. So when you're heating the air back up, won't it get, like, you were trying to get the moisture out in the first place, right? So won't it get moisture again or no?
If there's moisture present, it will absorb that moisture, but it's not present because we got rid of it. As we hit the dew point, the moisture is going to be removed from the air, and we'll put it, we'll introduce it back into the space as less humid air. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I was talking with Jessica during the office hour, which I have generally, it's an hour before the class starts. And she was asking some questions about you, Professor Yoon. If you could take a few minutes and describe exactly what you do in your profession. You've told us that you're in real estate, but we would, some of us would like to know a little bit more about your energy aspect of your profession?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wear a lot of different hats. I mean, my primary job was really supposed to be, really looking for energy saving opportunities, energy management of. So, my company does Class A commercial office buildings. So, a lot of the tall buildings you see throughout Manhattan. And so my job is to really kind of pursue energy efficiency projects, look for incentive programs from Con Edison and NYSERDA. That also takes me to a lot of the policy space because there's a lot of legislation, involving building energy consumption and carbon emissions. And on top of that, I also help us report our emissions and environmental data to our public stakeholders. There are ESG reporting standards, that are very common sustainability reporting standards, such as GRI, GRESB, CDP, SASB, a lot of alphabet soup of things. So I think, well, I wouldn't say just an energy auditor. I think, if you do just an energy audit, so for me, I'm very lucky in that I don't actually have to do a lot of the groundwork, in the sense that a lot of the low-hanging fruit, a lot of the very basic energy efficiency strategies have been done already, because my company is very much a sustainability leader. And we invest a tremendous amount of money and resources into energy efficiency. And like what Professor Bryce said, when you talk to the chief engineers of buildings, like when I talk to chief engineers, I mean, when you talk to them, actually, they know that their job is to save SL Green money on energy, and that's what they think about. And they would do. There's a lot of reset strategies, a lot of things like, hey, maybe I don't have to keep the air conditioning at full blast, at 4 p.m. because maybe people start leaving the office on a Friday at 3 p.m. So I'm going to see what is the occupancy count. If there's less people, maybe I can turn down the air conditioning. I can save some energy, but people are still comfortable, right? And say, at this building, some people don't go into the office until 9 o'clock. Then maybe we don't have to turn up the air conditioning until a little later in the day to save some hours. Or we were talking about demand charges, right? I think there's demand charges on electricity and there's demand charges on steam. In Con Edison during the winter, there are demand charges. The demand window is 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. So if the highest amount of steam you use in that time period, in one billing period, you're going to get charged for that. So all our chief engineers know that. So they don't turn up our steam use at 6 a.m. They turn it up at 5:30. And then at 6 a.m. they turn it back down. So that lowers our, because we already are basically preheating. So there's a lot of these strategies that we look at, and a lot of things I help them out with. I engage a lot of engineering consultants to help us look into these strategies and do these things. So that's what I manage a lot of those kind of projects, portfolio wide. Steam side savings, air side, water side, induction units, VFD, like a lot of motors and pumps. I also somehow started managing a lot of the cooling tower water management as well, because energy and water is very much related. Because if you have water, you have to pump it, right? If you want water to be clean, you need to filter it. There's an energy penalty to that. So pretty much anything with like kind of the building, the nitty gritty of the operations, like I kind of dabble in for my day job. Jessica, does that answer your question? Or Sam has a question. Are most of your building portfolio steam? Okay, this is short answer is yes. It's very interesting because what is the major energy source used for the buildings? And it's the major energy consumption of the building is based on heating and cooling the air, right? Basically air conditioning, HVAC. So typically, for example, most people, when you go home, you have an air conditioner, whether it's in a window or central, it's used as electrical power to run the compressor to provide cooling. So our buildings, for the most part, we use steam for both heating and cooling. So for heating, I don't think that's very tricky. We just use steam, and then maybe we use a heat exchanger to create hot water to distribute it, or we use steam directly to heat the space. But it comes to a big surprise to a lot of people that you can use steam to provide cooling for air conditioning, and that's what we do. And we actually, a lot of our buildings have steam turbines. So we take steam from Con Edison, high pressure steam, to run a turbine, and that's what drives the compression for space cooling. There's a couple of reasons for that, and I'm not going to go through all of that, but the most interesting aspect is that the way the Con Ed prices electricity, that electric prices are higher in the summer during high peak period than outside the summer. So because we use steam for cooling in the summer, that means we don't have to pay that very expensive summer electricity costs. So that's also one benefit of that. And that's actually better for the grid, because instead of these very large skyscrapers using more electric demand, some of it is used for steam. Okay, there's one more question from Sadi. What do you think of Passive House? That's a very, I think Passive House by itself is, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think Passive House is just kind of it's a misnomer. People think Passive House standards is like a cure-all. Passive House standards is nothing other than very, very well insulated buildings. And you don't have to call it Passive House or do Passive House standards, so-called, in order to achieve that. There are some very legitimate challenges to providing that sort of insulation, but I think the biggest issue is finding qualified contractors who can consistently build to that standard. And when you have a very, very large high-rise building, the tolerances are fairly tight and the timeline is very tight. You really don't have much margin for error. It's not a single family house. So I would say that you can definitely adopt strategies from Passive House, such as no thermal bridging, insulating, make sure all the spandrels are well insulated to be a very highly efficient building. But people need to understand that there's physics and engineering involved, in the sense that when you have a taller building, by default it's going to use more energy, because there's something called the draft effect. When you have a higher building, air is the warm air is naturally going to rise up, and you're going to pull in air from the exterior. It's just physics, because hot air rises. And when you have people and machinery inside a high-rise building that's like 1,000 feet high, you're going to have infiltration. You're going to pull in unconditioned cold air. So just by the nature of the physics, you are going to consume more energy if you need to hold a certain temperature and humidity set point. And so, there are a lot of things that I think people who are not practitioners might not appreciate. There are difference between low-rise, mid-rise, and high-rises. Now, to be fair, the majority of buildings are like low-rise and mid-rise, and a lot of these passive house strategies are absolutely very, very effective. But like Professor Bryce showed you in Lab 1, you have to make sure that your insulation doesn't mess up the condensation. Because if you get condensation inside your walls, you're going to get mold, and that is very dangerous. So a lot of times you hear people say, oh, just retrofit and put insulation in a building. It's not that simple. Not every single building topology and type allows you to easily do that. So really, really interesting and in-depth challenges, but something that we all, we need to make sure we're trying to do what we can. Okay, I answered a bunch of questions. Anyone else?
Yeah, do you ever work on retrofits, or more just like energy efficiency with what's there?
Well, I think that's kind of I think they're not mutually exclusive. I think that's the key thing I'm trying to say, is that because when you have, let's say, a building that is 40 stories high, what do you count as a retrofit? So I think kind of there's a determination under New York City rules, like DOB, is it a substantial retrofit or is it a not substantial retrofit? So when you qualify as a substantial retrofit, you have to follow the new energy code, the new building code. If you're less than that, that threshold, then you don't necessarily are forced to do with that high standard. So for example, if you are replacing 50% of your mechanical system, your HVAC system, that counts as a substantial retrofit. If you're doing X percentage, these things vary depending on the exact type. So, we're always constantly building out new spaces because, we're an office building with, many types. There are floors with like 20 tenants in them, right? It's like we have most of our buildings are where a tenant could rent, 2-3 floors, and each floor could be 20,000 square feet. So, 20,000 square feet for most parts of the country, that's a building, but for us, it's a floor. So there are different challenges because so we're constantly doing work, we're constantly turning over spaces and doing that. So, we're constantly making improvements. And beyond that, like what's special about SL Green is that we have an annual capital plan. So every year we evaluate capital projects to make, improvement to our building. Every year, every year, the building team, along with the engineers and portfolio managers, they get together and have to propose projects. And those projects get evaluated and presented to our executive team and said, hey, do you approve this project or not? So the answer is both. Just by course of our business, we're constantly building it out. And furthermore, our building engineers, a lot of them are local 94 union members, operating engineers. They're just very, very highly skilled. They're very, very smart. They're very, very technically proficient. Like we do a lot of in-house maintenance, preventive maintenance. We also, because we're a Class A, we're very expensive office building. People will pay us $100 per square feet, more than that even. So I mean, we're a public company. You can see what we charge for offices. It's not a secret. It's public information. So we, get Fortune 500 companies to rent space from us, and these are all household names that you've heard of. And some of these companies they themselves have corporate mandates. And they really appreciate the fact that, they have a building owner who is as committed to energy efficiency as they are. So it's a partnership. Some of our tenants are less sustainability inclined. That's just the nature of it. But, because we're in New York City where the regulations are very strict, every time you build out space, you're going to have to meet a very high standard. Does that answer some of your questions, Adam?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sadi, another question. When you consider personally, is it a balloon or applicable system? Sorry, can you clarify that, Sadi? Or am I saying your name wrong? Is it Sadi or Sadi? Well, I'm not sure what you mean by balloon system or applicable system.
Hello. Sorry, I have a technical problem.
Okay,
I mean,
please.
I'm an engineer, so also I have a capstone project currently about the passive house, but I just want to get your opinion about the system. This is a German system, and normally it's one family house, like acceptable, like some projects work well, but when we consider it like multifamily, like big cities, like New York, like Los Angeles, it affects. It's not getting like 100% efficiency. It is not a not exact thing like the passive house. So that's my question. Like it's like a balloon means like lying. I have some GC friends. They work for GCs, and they are not thinking like it's going to be a good effect for like long term. So that's why I am wondering your thoughts about passive house. Is it real system or it's just like a balloon?
Well, I would say I think the concept and aspect of passive house are absolutely sound and correct. I mean, there's no way you can say insulating better and then doing heat recovery is a bad thing. But I guess it really comes down to implementation, right? And like in Germany, passive house is a code, but that's very German on the climate, right? Because the climate in Germany is very temperate, and there are parts of like Northern California with a similar climate as Germany, like you can definitely take advantage of those strategies. But when you have to adopt it to climate with more heating and cooling needs, load, like in New York State, it's a different story. Some of these things become an issue. You are going to need active heating or active cooling because, it's too hot here. It's too cold here. It's not Germany. It's not California. So I think that's
Right.
one of the issues with, and to be fair, the New York State has looked at it. There is a one white paper. I'm not sure I recommend you guys to read it because the study is not that conclusive. It's a few years old, where they looked at like a one family house and performs a passive house. So people like to throw out, and I don't want to mean to beat up on architects, but when you hear some AIA or other organization advocate for passive house in New York, that's not a bad thing. But it's not going to drive when they say, oh, it's going to reduce energy consumption 80%. That's not true. I'm just going to go out there and say that's not true. And I'm comfortable saying that because there are studies comparing it with ASHRAE standards. And that's what the code is in the US. Because the assumptions and parameters you analyze for ASHRAE 90.1 are different from passive house. The assumptions are just different. It's not an apples to apples comparison. So when you level the comparison, you're not going to get 80%. Because you're just not measuring the same thing. So we have to be very careful when we advocate for what are you advocating for when you say passive house? And I think that's what gets lost in the discussion. So I think passive house concepts are very, very good and sound. But and what people don't realize is that aspect of passive house concepts are already getting incorporated into next generation energy and building codes. That's already getting done. So, but it's about adopting it to local standards and the local conditions where it does make sense, where we can get the best out of, those standards. The only benefit of calling things passive house is just that, buying materials and construction materials, because when it's to a passive house standard, that kind of, there is a bit of a supply chain, already, globally at least. Locally, we're still developing it. There's less confusion about material sourcing if you're, from an architect's perspective, I suppose. So it's not completely like full of hot air and not, fake, but it's not going to just solve the problem that people say it is. But there's something else you brought up, Sadi, that I want to talk about is multifamily housing. It's very tricky because fixing anything in multifamily is very, very difficult because, depending on how the HVAC system, is, implemented, sometimes, for example, if you have a radiator, steam radiator, and if you have 100 apartments in one building, and then you have steam radiators, right? It's steam, right? It's a gas, it's going to move. So if you want to fix the radiator, you need to fix all 100 radiators, right? So, but if you have 5 people who said, oh, I don't want you in my apartment, then what do? Then you can't fix it. Then you're not going to get the savings. So that's the problem with these things. Sometimes you need to wait until the tenant leaves, they leave their apartment for whatever reason, and then you go in to fix that, right? But that might take 10 years, right? And I think, we don't have 10 years to fix climate change. So I think it's just very, very tricky. But at the same time, you're like, okay, we're going to fix these buildings, and let's have someone move somewhere else, and we fix the building. I mean, this is a discussion in public housing, right? Public housing is in very bad shape. I think our government needs to invest more money to make sure people have safe and healthy and energy efficient living environment. It's really not. It's an absolute shame, and it's I'm trying not to be so extreme because we're being a recorded call, but like it's something that needs to be fixed. People should not be living in some of these conditions. But if they don't live in the public housing, where are we going to? We need more housing in general because we need to move people to clean and safe housing. Then we fix the old ones, right? Because you can't. A lot of discussions right now, people are environmental groups are like, oh yeah, we're just going to retrofit the building. Well, where are people going to live while we fix their buildings? And I think that's lost in the shuffle. Yes, we want to retrofit and make buildings efficient and carbon, lower carbon as possible, but people need places to live. So, it's a very, very hard discussion. And, we can't have open, people need places to live. So we need to build more housing. But if you say, oh, real estate's making money for building housing, yes, but we just need more housing, period. But that's just my opinion, okay? I just will say that. So it's a very complicated issue in that multifamily is the billion-dollar question because in places like New York, that's where the majority of the emissions and energy consumption is. And, you know, it's very difficult to, like, people say, oh, we have proven technology. Yes, but you need to be aware of the implementation challenges because we have some very, very smart people for many years trying to solve these problems. And there's a reason they haven't been solved yet. And because they're that hard. So, you know, as you become more professionals involved in this field, it's very important for you to understand the perspective of all stakeholders, whether that's the engineer, the architect, the person living in the building owner, the building operator, or even the government, and the utility. Everyone is so many people involved, which is why I like my job because I get to talk to all these people and try to come up with solutions. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Of course. I mean, I'm just happy to share my insight and share some perspective because, you know, we're all going to learn from each other and, you know, work together in the future. Maybe I'll take one or two more questions before we move on to the Open Studio part.
I have a quick question. Do you report to stakeholders directly, or is that like not part of what you're doing?
So, you know, I think the term stakeholder can be very complicated, but in general, stakeholder just refers to anybody that our business impacts. So people, the local community, people who pay our rent, our tenants, you know, our employees, you know, my board of directors, my executives, our investors, the government, everyone is, you know, the utilities. So, so, I mean, in terms of internal reporting, I mean, as a public company, we are accountable to our, you know, A, the government, and B, our stockholders. And we have to be transparent about these things. So I think those are the two biggest ones. And of course, we're also very much accountable to our tenants because they pay the rent, right? And we have legal responsibilities to uphold to them. That if you know, we say our buildings are opened, you know, Monday through Friday, you know, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We need to make sure that the air conditioning is on that because that's what the lease says. That's what our promise is to them, and that's what they pay us for. And if they need more, they need to come in and work on Saturdays. You know, we need to make sure that, you know, they give us requests and we turn on the air conditioning on Saturday. So make sure the elevators are working. So there's a lot of obligations all around. And I think that's because a building is the nexus of a lot of things. You know, people work in buildings. It's an investment, you know, for some companies. It's also a source of jobs. So it touches on a lot of different things, you know, and it's a destination actually, right? I mean, we have gyms, we have restaurants, we have doctors' offices, you know, so, you know, a lot of this for businesses, and we have to care about their needs. Okay, last chance. Well, I mean, for now at least. Okay, I'm going to talk about Open Studio. So I will say that we are not going to take a break yet because, you know, but we will take a break in a little bit. So I want to say this is what my plan is for tonight for the demonstration part. We're going to do two things. One, I'm going to finish up talking about the parts of Open Studio that unfortunately you know, could not complete last week. And then secondly, you know, I'm going to talk about Lab 2. And so, you know, after I finish, you know, going through the loads and the constructions and some of the spaces, you know, demonstration, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to jump into Lab 2, where we're going to talk about how to look at the, you know, the prototype building, commercial buildings. Okay. You know, so, you know, I feel like I've done this sort of demonstration last week a few dozen times by now, you know, a lot of times with Professor Bryce. But, you know, inevitably, you know, you trip up and you keep finding things that don't work. So after you know, after last week's, you know, class, I spent a little bit of time, and I think 10 minutes later, I realized what I missed. So now I'm going to start sharing my screen on Open Studio. So this is the model we had from last week, I believe. Okay. So it's going to take a second to load. Okay, I'm going to reshare that. Okay, now can you guys see?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Jessica, I'll answer your question afterwards. Maybe during a break. Okay, so this is the model that I showed you, and last time what tripped me up was that when I was on the space tabs, I was trying to modify the loads, right? The internal loads, like what is radiating heat? How many people, how many light bulbs, how many how much electric equipment, which is like plug loads, how many computers you have, how many how many copiers and printers. How many TVs you have plugged, those are plug loads. And then there's dimensional. So I couldn't, I had trouble removing these loads. And I told you that's because they were inherited from the space types. So I went to the space types tab and I, couldn't get rid of them. And then what I realized is that, of course, there was one more level above space types, and that's for the entire building. So if you go on the left, right above spaces, there's a tab called facility. And I showed you guys this tab when I was going through how many floors the building has. There's 3 floors, right? What I neglected to point out was that on the first tab, on the facility, tab, there's a lot of defaults that you can set for the entire building. And on this building, there was already a default space type for open office, climate zones, 4 through 8. That was CZ stands for. And because this was on, I could not edit any of the loads on the space level because we already set what the space type is for the entire building. It's an open office at the building level. And instead of going through all 12 spaces and setting them one by one, we just said, oh, the entire building, no matter how many spaces we have, it's going to be an open office. So I'm going to remove this template, this space type template. I'm going to exit out right here. Okay. And then when you go back to, and I'll just show you guys very quickly how do you put it back on, right? Space types. Right. Yeah, see. So if you see on the right, you can see that under space types, there are multiple templates for like break rooms, closed office, just very generic space types, mechanical rooms, IT room, lobbies. Very bottom, there's a whole building, right? Just for to keep it convenient. I think it was a medium office, I think. Okay. Might be large, but you just have to drag it and drop it in, right? But I said I was going to remove it. So when you exit out, remember, there's no template for space types now for the entire building. When you go back to the space tab, all right, and then you click on loads, you can see all of those internal loads that were there before are now gone. All the people, the lights, the electrical equipment. So now I can, can show you what, how do you build and assign these internal loads manually, one by one, with full control. So on the right-hand side, I'd say, well, what contributes to the heating and cooling load of a building? Well, the first thing is like how many people they are, right? Because like I told you last time, one adult, person is about a 100-watt light bulb. So we go to people's definition. We can say, okay, the first floor south space. I think that's a corridor. So I'm going to go ahead and say, we're going to stick with 189.1 for now, the template, and say it's an office corridor. And I just need to click it and drag it and drop it in. Boom. And you can see what the load name is. And, there's one. So here's what's interesting. So we defined the occupancy, right? This is, it's a corridor. It's going to have 0.001 person per square feet. Or in other words, you're going to have one person for 1,000 square feet. So here's the thing. I told you that one person is, you know, 100-watt light bulb, right? But the question is that people go in and out of the space, right? Are there always going to be, let's say the corridor, you know, is, I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call this a corridor. So the question is that if the corridor is 1,000 square feet, and you know, I'm saying that, you know, it has one person, the occupancy density is 1 per 1,000 square feet, one person. My question is that, you know, how often is that person there? You know, is that person there 24/7? Are they there 9 to 5 p.m.? Are they there only Monday through Fridays? Are they there on Christmas? Right? Are they there, you know, on New Year's Day? The answer is maybe, right? So you can't just, so when you set these loads, you know, you don't just set, you know, the heat, you know, how much, you know, heat they radiate. You also need to set what's called a schedule, because you need to know the schedule of that person coming and going. And that is where, you know, next to definition, there's a whole schedule here. And that's where you can, you know, drag and drop. On the right-hand side, if you scroll down, you can see that there's a whole bunch of different schedules. And you don't have to be concerned about the exact categories, because the next thing I'm going to show you is how to set a schedule. You know, what does it look like? So I'm going to go keep it simple and say, as I said, it's a meeting, it's an office, and it's a occupancy schedule. Let's see. Okay, there's no schedule for now that's for corridors, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take, let's say, meeting, you know, a template here that says medium office building occupancy. So just draw. And if I select. But now I want to show you what that actually means. What does a schedule look like? So in order to do that, I'm going to go to the tab called schedules. So when you, it's the second tab from the top. So schedules. So just like, you know, loads and spaces, you can bundle, you know, schedules into a set. And I'm not going to, you know, dwell into that too much. But on the second tab, it's on the top is schedules, right? So if we look at the schedule that we were just assigning to the corridor, which is medium building office, this is what it looks like. So OpenStudio, I think, is actually a very, you know, powerful and easy to use scheduling tool. It gives you a lot of power to choose exactly what the scaling is. So this is a certain, you know, there's a certain amount of complexity here, you know, that I'm going to go through. So right now you can see that the boundary of the schedule is 0 to 1. It just means, so right now the way the schedule works is that it's a multiplier, because I'm saying that in that space in the corridor, it's one person per 1,000 square feet, right? And if we remember back on the space tab, there's a section called multiplier, because if I just move it, you know, I can say now it's just not just one person. I can do times 2. It can be 2 person per 1,000 square feet. The schedule in this case is also a multiplier. So if you're at maximum value 1, you know, whenever the schedule says 1, you know, it's maximum value, that means that you take your occupancy, you know, your people's definition, you multiply by this the schedule 1, and you do have one person per during that time. Okay, so I'm going to explain how the schedule works. Okay, so you can see here that I can pick any day of the year. In this case, I'm going to click default. So you can see that, you know, it's a little complicated, and I'm going to skip over this part for now, but you know, if we get a chance, I will explain that in more detail. So you can see in the light blue on the right are the weekday schedule, right? And right now I'm clicking on right now. So this is what the occupancy schedule looks like on a typical weekday. So there is 0 occupancy at midnight, which is, hour 0, all the way to 6 a.m. And then at 6 a.m. you start seeing, some people come in. And right now it's set at, 0.1, which is 10%. So they're saying that at around 6 a.m., 10% of the people start coming in, right? Which is, not unreasonable, right? Because 6 a.m. is a little early, but some people do have to start going to work that early. And this is an hourly schedule, right? Because if you can set it every 15 minutes instead, or every minute. But for our purposes, we're going to stick with just 1 hour. If you want, you can make it more specific. In real life, I monitor my occupancy every 5 minutes. So, but we don't need to do that for the purpose of demonstration. And then, once it comes 7 o'clock, it goes up and you have more people coming in. So when you hover in now, it's 20. So, now at 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., the building is 20% occupied. All right. So the space, or, I'm saying building, but like that space. And then what they're saying is just that at 8 o'clock, the rest of people come in. 8 o'clock is when opening is, and 8 o'clock is where all the employees come into the building and they walk in, this space. Just for the sake of, discussion, I'm just going to move this one up and say it's maximum. So yeah, at 8 a.m., we're at 100% occupancy. Everyone's at the building. So, whatever your space is, and then the amount of people you have based on your people's definition, with this schedule, you're telling Open Studio that, at 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., only 10% of the occupancy people are there. 7 to 8 a.m., 20%. But from 8 a.m. all the way to 12 o'clock lunchtime, it's 100%. So, that's what we're looking at. So I want to go back to the space tab and tell you guys what it looks like, but I'm going to very quickly go back to people's definition. And like I told you last time, I'm going to just define, people's definition. I'm going to call this, 10 people, 10 persons. And right here, I'm just going to assign called 10 persons, right? So I'm going to go back to spaces here. And, let me do on space 2, second floor south space. Go back, and might not narrate every single step I'm taking, but I assume that you guys can follow because you're seeing the screen. So I'm going to say space, second floor south space has 10 people, right? So it's a different definition, right? Because here I'm defining the exact number of people here. So you have several options, right? You can have Open Studio, scale it to your square footage or give the exact count. But let's say second floor south space, I know there's only 10 people here, maximum. So if I go and assign the occupancy schedule, what do I have here? I said medium office building occupancy, right? So by doing that, what I'm telling Open Studio is that in this second floor space, with at 6 a.m., it's a 10% occupancy, right? So what's 10% of 10 people? It's one person, right? So so Open Studio now knows that, because I gave Open Studio a schedule, Open Studio now knows that, from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., there's one person there. Then from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., there's 2 people there because it's 20% occupancy, right? It's 0.2. 0.2 times 10 people is 2 people. And then from 8 a.m. to noon, 12, I say it's 100% occupied. So therefore there's 10 people there. And then if we go back to the schedule, we can see that at the medium building, there we go. Then during lunchtime, people go outside for lunch, right? So I think maybe half the people decide to go outside to get lunch. So that's why from 12 to 1, 12 to 1 p.m., the space is only 50% occupied. There's only 5 people because so in that space, 5 people decide to go and buy lunch. The other 5 people pack lunch and they're eating lunch in that space. But by 1 p.m., everyone rushes back to work and they're back in the space. We're back to, 100% occupancy. Okay. Does anyone have any questions here? I'm going to pause you really quick. Any questions before I'm going to show something else?
Quick question.
Yes.
You have to drag people into the loads first before you can add things?
Sorry, when you say add things, add what things?
Like add the schedule.
No, you can you should be able to oh no, you do need to add a load. It doesn't have to be a person, right? It could be a light bulb or or something or a piece of equipment being on. But you do need to add a load before you. So for example, if space 102 is fairly empty, right? If I have to drag a schedule here, because you see how the schedule is blank because there is none. So you have to assign a load first. So for example, actually, this is actually a great question. Someone said, well, we haven't made an internal match yet. I don't think I'm gonna go, but let's say a light. I'm gonna say, the printing room. The printing room is space 103. I drag it here. But the question is now, okay, how often are the lights on at the printing room, the copy room? So now I can go and put in a schedule there. And here, let's go back to schedule. So in this case, do they have a lighting schedule? Let's keep it simple. So let's look at what a lighting schedule looks like, okay? Office building lighting. Office building light, okay. Because the idea is that for every type of load, you can actually have a different, the units that you use for the schedule can be different. So
Wait,
let's go.
Sorry, can you go back to the load real quick?
Yes.
So you see how when you add a load, it's above that gray box, right? But when I add it, like it automatically goes into that box.
No, the box is still there, but they added a new one.
Yes, but when I put a space type, it goes into the box. But when I put the person, it has a new space. So I don't know if it's just.
Sorry, when you said you pull in the space type.
When I how in the first floor you put in office corridor.
Yes.
So when I put that in there, it doesn't give me a new box. It fills it in.
On where?
On the load.
Okay. I think there's a couple of reasons there. That's because you might have a default schedule set. So what I could do here is that, the tricky thing, and that's the very powerful thing about Studio, is that you can assign things at different levels. Because instead of me going, let's say every space can have 4 or 5 loads, right? And then I have to assign the schedules for 4 or 5 times. I can just go to the space and say this entire space has to follow one schedule. So I can put a schedule set. I can say, oh, that's a space, that's a corridor. If I drop that in, watch what happens. Okay, that did not override it. I'll do it on a blank one. Let's see what it looks like. Schedule set. There we go. Okay, call it break room. Let's see. Space 203. So when we go to space 203, and I say it's a break room, right? All right, what's in a break room? Electric equipment. Oh, break room. Yeah, so let's put in some space 203. You see that when I pop in space 203, the office building equipment automatically populates? Mm-hmm. That's because I already set the schedule set here. like in a higher level. So it's really convenient because when I go and add more and more, if I put more and more loads on space 203, let's call it break room. I don't have to drag and drop 5 times. I can just go and put, I'm gonna put people there now. People's definition. All right, I'm gonna drag it in. Boom. The really smart thing is that because it's a schedule set, they know to assign the right schedule to the right type, right? You see how for the people's definition, they assign an occupancy schedule. But whereas the equipment, they put a building equipment schedule. So, and you see the activity schedule. We're not going to go into that. It's basically saying that, you know, how active are the people. So it's very confusing when you learn it, but when you actually start using it, it actually is very, very useful because if you can make your own schedule sets and say that, hey, for break rooms, we're always going to have these schedules for people and how much things are, how often the lights are on and how often we use like the microwave, for example.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So, but Jessica, this is exactly the issue that was tripping me up last week. So, you know, but it was at a different level, at the whole building level instead of just the space types. So I completely understand that it's going to take a little time to get used to this aspect. So I do want to show you back, you know, different types of schedules. So I'm going to spec out a few more types of. You know what? Since we're talking about the break room build a schedule set, I'm going to go to schedule set and show you guys what it looks like. So the break room schedule set, you can see that for the different type of loads, they already have a schedule assigned to it, right? For hours operation is blank, but for number of people, they already have this, you know, office miscellaneous occupancy, right? But if I want to make my own, if I say, hover over this and I say, like, I'm gonna make a copy, X2 copy. And I'm going to say Jessica's schedule set, right? So this is Jessica's schedule. So instead of, you know, for number of people, let's take a quick look first, actually. What does this say? So office miscellaneous occupancy. So you can see that it's a fractional schedule, like you said, it's out of 0 to 1. You know, full occupancy is only 40%. It's not set at 100. But let's say you want to change that. You're like, no, I don't like that. So you can say, you make your own and just say, gosh, okay. Jessica's occupancy schedule. Right, and then you say like, oh no, I think it should be 100%. Boom. And then what we can do is go back to Jessica's schedule and say instead of office miscellaneous schedule, I can just go and say no, it's this one. And then for lighting, we can do the same thing. So for lighting, there's it uses office building light. So you can see for lighting, this fractional percentage thing makes more sense because, you know, what you're saying is that, you know, even at night, you still have 5% of the lights on in that space. And then come, in this case, not 6 a.m., but 5 a.m., some of the lights, 10% of the lights turn on. So 5 to 7 a.m. And then from 7 to 8 a.m., we're up to 30% of the lights on. And then 8 a.m., everyone comes into the office, comes into the building. Now, even then, they're saying, oh, 90% of the, you know, the lights are on. And then right around 4 o'clock, some people start leaving. They start turning some lights off. Now we're down to 70% of the lights being on. So, but like I said, if you don't like it, you can change it, right? So I want to copy it and say, no, we don't like it. I'm going to say this is Jessica's light schedule. And say that, you know, under Jessica's space, you know, people don't come in at 5 a.m. When you hover over it, you type in 0.15. 0.5. People don't come in until 7 a.m. All right. So you just change your schedule, for example. Now, you know, we can go back and say, for Jessica's lighting schedule, sorry. We're going to follow Jessica's lighting schedule, not the other one, and so on and so forth. For people, I'm going to, show, you know what? I'll do 2 more: electrical equipment, infiltration, office building equipment. Same thing. So this one's very interesting. So office equipment like plug loads, I told you, it's stuff like the copy machine, the printer, the computers that are plugged in, right? So this schedule is very reflective of reality, that even though people are out of the office, but they still have equipment plug loads plugged in. And just because things are turned off or not turned off, because sometimes, people don't turn stuff off. Who has been in an office building and people do not turn the computers off at night? Exactly. So let's say, because of that reason, the schedule reflects that reality and show that even throughout the middle of the night, you're still using 40% of your maximum plug load. And then people come in at 8 o'clock, they turn all the computers on, they brew coffee, they start printing. We're at 90% of the power draw. But like I said, this is a really illustrative point. I'm going to show one more. You know what? That's it. So schedule send. Okay. Do you guys understand the concept of a schedule? Do you have any questions? I'm going to assume no. Okay, I think everyone seems to understand schedules. Just for posterity, I am going to show you guys how to make a schedule. The easiest way to make a schedule, I recommend, like I've shown you guys, is just to take an existing schedule for the type of load you have, and then copy it. Just copy it, and then start modifying it, into the way you like. Okay, that's what I really recommend. Alternatively, if you just build one from scratch, I just want to show you guys what it looks like. If you press the green plus sign, you can see that there's a lot of choices, right? You can have different type of schedules, and you should really think about what sort of load you're trying to assign it to. If you're trying to assign it to, let's say, a piece of equipment you're going to turn on and off, you can just have an on-off schedule. If you have one that's up to temperature, oh, of course, how can I forget? I was going to show you guys the temperature schedule. So this is going to do with the HVAC equipment. So when we get to the HVAC equipment, you're going to be able to set this set point of your HVAC, right? When are you going to start turning on the air conditioning? When are you going to turn it off? So, that's what we're looking at here, is that, right now it's at 74.3 degrees. And because I set the schedule type to be temperature. But if I set this if this schedule, I want to call it my cooling, Alvis's cooling schedule. So, this is where I'm going to set the set point for me to turn on my air conditioning. In the middle of the night, when no one's in the office, I don't, I'm going to when you double click, you can separate it, right? So I double click right around 8 a.m. So above and below 8 a.m., I can modify. You can click it, drag it up and down, or it's just like sketching. When you hover over it, you can see that, I wish I had a pointer, that little box on the type. When you hover over it, you can start typing. If I want to say 85 and then enter. So right now I'm saying that from midnight to 8 a.m., it can be 85 degrees Fahrenheit in the space, and we're not going to turn our air conditioning on because no one's there. It's a waste of energy. Because think about it, we have all this computers and stuff on at night. It's going to generate heat, right? it's just gonna naturally go. But you know what? If no one's there, I'm not gonna waste my energy cooling it. But when it comes to 8 a.m., you know, I want to make sure that people are comfortable. So, you know, we need to start providing air conditioning. So 74 degrees is a little bit warm. So, but let's say it's let's say it's hotter than 72 degrees. So as long as it's above 72 degrees, I'm telling OpenStudio you have to turn on the air conditioning, for example. And then right around lunchtime, you know, I told you, right, half the people leave. So if half the people leave, I'm like, okay, if half the people leave, I don't really care about it being warm from 12 to 1. I think right around here. And I'm going to say, oh, okay, maybe not 85 degrees. That's a little bit aggressive, but maybe 78 degrees. Okay, so during lunchtime it could be a little hotter because people are leaving. So let's turn the air conditioning off to save money. So I'd say right around 4 o'clock, some people start leaving because, you know, they have other things that's what their schedule is like. I'm gonna double click that. And then when some people start leaving, you know, I can say like, well, maybe now I can do 74 degrees. But then the last people don't leave until around 6 o'clock, right? And then after 6 o'clock, I'm like, okay, guys, we don't need air conditioning. Go home, 85 degrees, all right? Now, of course, if some people stay late after 6 p.m., the air conditioning is off. They're going to be warm. If there's a lot of people, if there's like 1 or 2 people or nobody, they're going to be comfortable. Because remember, this is not the room temperature. This is the set point for my air conditioning. This is me telling the air conditioner, hey, if it's below this temperature, turn on and provide cooling. All right. So basically, I'm leaving the air conditioner off all the way until it's 85 degrees. If you're working if you're by yourself working at 9 p.m. in the office, it's gonna take, the temperature is not gonna be 85 degrees because you're one person. You're not generating a lot of heat. Now, if you're in your space and you're having a barbecue and then you're deciding to cook dinner by yourself because then the temperature might go to 85 and then the air conditioner might kick on. Okay, does anyone have a question about temperature schedule? Okay, we have a question. Oh, Aaron, so the way you have that vertical line is you just double click. So whatever point you want it to be, you just double click, you have a kink in it, and then you can move it up and down. And then to remove it, you just unclick it. Yeah, sorry, double click it again. Okay, that's good. Okay, does anyone have any other questions about temperature schedules or schedules in general? Okay. Yeah, I think schedules are fairly, once you get the hang of it, it's, you know, it's very, very intuitive once you get the hang of it. The thing that is the trickiest is the units, right? Because when you see, you're like, wait, 0 to 1, it's a bit confusing. But when you look at some of the other schedules type that are more intuitive, like a temperature scale or like on and off, I think that's a little bit more clear. And same thing for like velocity, right? Or because so you can have feet per minute, like this could be a speed, right? How fast does your fan blow? What percent, 0 to 100%? How many RPM if you're have a piece of equipment that spinning? And flow rate, same thing, right? How much cold and hot water are you flowing through? Because we're not really going to talk very much about plumbing fixtures and water flow, but that's something else that has an effect on energy because sometimes water needs to be pumped. Okay, I am going to go back to spaces. So the next thing I'm going to talk about spaces, and this is really I think the last topic we're going to go A space is defined by 6 or more surfaces, right? OpenStudio doesn't, you don't strictly have to have a rectangular prism, but those are the easiest one to work with. Like for example, Space 102 has 7 surfaces, and I'm trying to figure out what this is, because apparently it has 5 walls and a floor and a roof ceiling. And I'm going to have to think about that. I don't remember drawing something like that, but I guess it must be true. But it's very tricky. Or Space 202, right? I already named one wall, so we can go with that. So every surface can be made out of different materials. So the question becomes like, how do you tell OpenStudio what materials each surface is made out of? And in OpenStudio, the terminology is called the construction. So defining your surface construction is how OpenStudio knows what materials that surface is made of. Or I should say, technically, OpenStudio doesn't care what materials are made of. OpenStudio only cares about the R value of that surface, right? But how does OpenStudio know what the R value is, right? Because you tell OpenStudio what the R value is, right? And how do you tell OpenStudio what the R values are, right? By telling them that, oh, this surface is made of this construction. And this construction has 4 layers in it, and each layer has its own R value. So now we're going to go to constructions. But as you can see, right now these are in green. And these are in green. I can't edit this. And that's because just like, the schedules and from before, this model has constructions, set at the facility level. The entire building is going to have office building materials constructions based on this OpenStudio template. So I'm just going to X out of it, this 189.1 Climate Zone 5 office. Okay, so once I remove this from the facility level, if you go back to spaces and you go to surfaces, it's going to take a few seconds to load. You can see that all the constructions are now blank. So this gives me the ability to modify. So let's stick with the corridor space. Let's keep it very simple. So on the right-hand side, you can see that there's under construction. I will be very honest. On the right-hand side, I never understood why OpenStudio doesn't list this in alphabetical order, because the way they list this is just so intuitive that I can't tell you how much time I spent in demonstration just trying to figure out where the location of the each category is, because it's not intuitive, and I can't sort it by alphabetical order either. But when you scroll down and you get to constructions, there's a whole bunch of templates. So I'm going to go into the construction tab and go under the hood with you guys, but for now we're going to use these templates. For the corridor on the first floor, south space, let's look at surface 1. Surface 1 is the floor, it's the ground. And so I'm just going to go there and say there is, okay, I'm not going to dwell into the depth of the issues. I know sometimes Professor Bakker likes to talk about the challenges about the R values of any surface that touches the ground and the heat transfer. I'm not going to get into that. But for the sake of OpenStudio, use the default one, that is external slab carpet 4-inch. This is always the external one that's touching the ground. And we're done. So for the roof ceiling, now we know that this is an interior space, right? There's no sun and no wind, on this roof. So we're going to take the interior ceiling here and drag and drop it here. Okay. And for the remaining 4 surfaces, to save a little time, or no difference, I guess. Yeah, this page can be a little slow because there's a lot of elements for OpenStudio to handle. So these 4 walls, actually, I messed up. That's not true. Okay, so these 3 wall surfaces are exterior because there's sun exposed and wind exposed. So I'm going to go and say we're in climate zone 4, and this is an exterior wall mass. Okay, I'm going to drag it here, click select, and give it a few seconds. Okay, now this interior surface, I'm going to go back to interior walls. Okay, so now you told Open Studio that what are the R values of the 6 surfaces in this corridor space. Okay, there's a question in the chat I'm going to address. Can we have a 5-minute break? We're almost there. You know, maybe another 5 minutes. We're going to take a break before we jump into lab 2. Okay, we will have a break. Don't worry. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to go over before we have a break is construction. I'm going to dive into what exactly are these constructions that we're talking about. So the third tab here is called constructions, and just like the schedule sets, you can have a construction set. And these are templates that, you know, that's why when you draw in SketchUp, if the templates are loaded, it'll automatically assign it. But I'm going to go to constructions, and so we were looking at the interior wall, for example, right? When you click on the interior wall, you can see that there are 3 layers to the walls. There's a gypsum board, there's an airspace, and more gypsum board. Interior ceiling, same thing, similar thing, I should say. Lightweight concrete, ceilings, airspace, and some acoustic tile. When you look at the external walls, sorry, the ground surface, sorry, the floor construction touching the ground, it's just for now it's heavyweight concrete and a carpet padding. And one last thing is the exterior wall. The exterior wall is a little bit more involved, and just like from your lab 1, you can see that in this case, you know, the template has 4 layers on it. 1-inch stucco brick from the outside, 8-inch concrete, wall insulation, and then gypsum board. And then I want to clarify here that the outside air film and the inside air film are already taken into account. You don't have to drag and drop that in Open Studio. Open Studio already knows that every material that has a wall outside is going to have the outside air film and the inside air film. But you know, so you can see that each of these constructions are defined by materials. So we're going to take a quick look under the hood and what are the materials looking like. Materials, I'm going to look at the gypsum board, right? The gypsum board, you know, do you have a lot of parameters here? There's a thickness of the material, there's a conductivity. So I just want to remind you guys that the, you know, right now you can't spec the, you know, you can't put in, this is a little confusing because you can't put in the R values of the, on here. The R value is actually a derived value because the R value is a thermal resistance value. So the R value is actually the thickness divided by the conductivity equals R. So when you say 0.5, because when you look at dimensional analysis, 0.5 divided by conductivity, that's what the R value is. So, you know, unlike other programs, Open Studio lets you, instead of just because the R value is dependent on the thickness of the material too, just like how in Lab 1 we talked about how it's an R value per inch, right? So this case, Open Studio, because it's for power users, they don't let you use the R value. They say, oh yeah, tell us the thickness and the conductivity because that's the same thing as R value. So the conductivity is an intrinsic value of the material. Different materials are physical property. In this case, gypsum has specific heat, and also has a density, you know, also these are physical properties. Same thing for wood, insulation board, so on and so forth. Okay, and then similarly you can have air gaps. See, in this one, air gap, this is an R value, thermal resistant. This is an R value of the air gap, you know. I also want to show one thing. If you go to glazing material, there's a lot of parameters you can choose. The thickness, solar transmittance, solar heat gain coefficient. Wait, where is solar heat gain coefficient? I guess it's not there, huh? But okay, I want to do a super quick exercise to show you guys like what I could do is, how do I make a window? So right now when I look at a window, this interior window is a single pane clear 3mm glass, right? If I want to go ahead and says, you know what? No, I want to make a double pane window, right? Here's what I can do. I can go on the right and say materials is, this is a glazing material. So I'm going to say I want 3mm clear glass, right? But then I'm going to put, where is it? No, it's, no, glazing, yes. That is interesting. Huh, where's my argon? Ah, library, let's see. Okay, you know what? I need to load a library. Give me 1 second, guys. We are in an office building, right? Let's just do this. I should tell you guys though, if you don't, a lot of these templates, if they are not showing up, sometimes you just go to File, Load Library, and OpenStudio by default has all these things, and I would just pick one of these libraries, corresponding to your building type, and then just load it in. Air gap materials. Okay. Well, this is awkward once again because I'm supposed to have a gas material, and let me check something really quickly because I do have my reference guide here. You know what? Here's what I'm gonna do. I can't find it. I'm gonna make it because I can make that material. So since I don't have it, I'm gonna make an air gap. I'm gonna call this argon. Okay. And it's a very thin air gap, and argon has a molecular weight of 39.9. Okay. So that's all I'm doing. So now that I just define argon. Okay, give me 1 sec. When we go to Windows, double pane window. All right, I'm gonna go back to my model and go to gas window materials. I have argon. I drop it in. So now I have a double pane window with argon gas in between. And then what I can do, for example, is it's a bad example. I'm not sure if I have window. But if I go to Spaces tab again and go to Subsurface and go to my window. Oh, I don't have a window actually. Apologize. I'm gonna put on the door. I'm going to pretend that the door is the window. And then when I go to constructions again, I'm gonna assign that fake door, that window, double pane window. So now OpenStudio is gonna think that door is made out of glass, which is not false. I mean, you can have doors made out of double pane glass. It's not the most sensible thing, but it's not impossible. So okay, any questions on talking about how these things work roughly? So that everyone understand how the spaces work, right? You can assign internal loads there. You can assign the assembly, the materials for every surface, because you're going to need to use that skill for your lab 2, because and give us a very sneak peek. Lab 2 is to make a modification to one of those things. Okay. If we don't have any questions, I think let's take a 10-minute break. Before we talk about Lab 2, we're still going to be working OpenStudio. But I'll be here in the meantime. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or just unmute yourself and talk about it. So let's start at 8:42, guys.
All right, I'm going to pause for the break. If somebody starts to talk again, I'll turn the recording back on.
Yeah, I'm now.
Okay. Professor Bryce, do we want to start recording again? I think Biga wants to show the class, what she was talking about last time.
I think it's recording.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm recording.
Okay.
Okay. So just done. Okay. Is it visible now?
Yes, now it is.
Yeah. What I was talking about, how we can do, like how we can reduce our time in starting on working on Open Studio. There is some steps for doing it. There is model info. Firstly, we need to check our units. So like what's units here, and after that, we need to follow some steps in it. This is a one. Uh, uh, Here we can make layers like 1, 2, 3, whatever we want. And if there is something coming, if we are rastering on model, we can just close it, or we can for hiding it. Like this one. Okay. SketchUp model. And another layer was like another external, like, okay, just a minute. Okay, so this will be like Open Studio. So what I was talking about, like mostly we can get our drawings in 2D, in AutoCAD drafted for retrofitting. So for that we can use AutoCAD to raster it, like from PDF to convert PDF into 2D file, and we can import here. And right now I'm not import. Do I need to do on AutoCAD also to explain it?
No, I mean, it's up to you. I think I would say one thing, Abika.
Yeah.
Importing the DWG files is only available in SketchUp Pro. So that's one of the few functions that the SketchUp Pro had that SketchUp Make doesn't have. So before, when we were teaching this class, when the Pro trial expired, that functionality was lacking. And one of the reasons, because unfortunately SketchUp doesn't really give students the Pro version for free, unlike some other software programs. Just so you know. But
Yeah.
obviously, if you're a professional workflow and whatnot, that would not be an issue.
So,
But I think you still have the Pro trial, so feel free to show the
yeah, this one I'm making block, like for Open Studio. I'm making is a component for right now. I'm not doing anything in it. So for marking window, it's easy. Like if we have Pro, we can import our elevation here, and I'm just drawing on it for just basic idea about it, how we're gonna do it. So like, just a minute. So here we are. So like, so here, so we don't need when we import elevation file, there is nothing on it. So okay, this will come in also in component, or we can make component here. So after doing this, we have to go here, unhide last. So what we found here is a block. So we just need to do one thing for just making it easy. We just need to copy these things from here, Control X, and we are going to place on it, paste in place. And when we are working on it, we just need to select this whole model, Control X. Just a minute. Oh, why is this coming up? I need to select. Oh, yeah. So when we select this option here, yeah, so we can paste here this model. Yeah. So it's easy to just convert it, and we can avoid Open Studio, like We can sometimes we do mistake like we can don't use undo command. So before doing it, we can just do in SketchUp and we can convert into like Open Studio after doing it.
Okay, that's very interesting. So I'm gonna have to try that. So basically, I think so the key is making sure that you delete the actual space and you just have the the how to say, just the lines, right? There's no
Yeah, there's nothing inside it. I can show you.
So basically, you're saying that you can cut, you're able to copy components, but not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to create like planes one by one. We can just develop our model through extruding, and we can add internal walls, and we can add it through it also. I'm just going to show you. So here you can see there is nothing inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just taking inside. So we can just mark over here. We can copy, or we can also copy internal wall, and we can do the same things, and that will help to minimize time and yeah, making and errors also. Like if we using this command like measuring tool for marking window, if we do some mistakes, we can't undo it. We can't undo it. So it's like before doing it, we have to like make it in layer and components. So it will be easy to do these things, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is really interesting. I will try to see if I have time to play around with it. And, I mean, this would be super helpful. I mean, it seems to work. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. I just, I just want to make sure when we have more complicated geometry, there's a copy as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we can make complicated geometry through this one. Like some buildings have curvilinear form, inclined form. We can just convert it model and just after that we can paste in Open Studio 3D box.
So my question is just that you made the entire I saw you make components twice. Was there a reason for that, or what?
It's a reason. If we don't make component like block, sometimes what we do, these are separate lines, right? So if we're selecting it, something will select with it. So it's easy for selection, for avoiding this.
Oh, I see. So it's a component. It's just purely for a selection purpose. I see.
It's easy to select whole things together, because sometimes he's selecting and something is left. How are we gonna do it?
Okay. I see the point. Because I remember Professor Bryce was experimenting with something similar with the components before, but it was just getting a little tricky to use. So I'm glad you had success, and I think thank you so much for sharing this with us. I think this is going to really be such a powerful tool, and it's just fantastic because this is something that's
we just off from here. If anything is like we need to hide it. If we put like in layer already, we can just hide from here, and we can, if we didn't place in layer before, we can just place from here, entity info. Right now nothing is there, so there is no option coming with it, nothing block is there. So there will be option coming to like after selection, like just if we made something, right? So if we select it, there will be option coming for selecting in layer. So it will be easy to maintain hold the things in systematic. After doing it, we have this tool inspector for inspect like this one. Before going on Open Studio, what I was thinking, we don't need to like do things later. We can just do basic things like what kind of wall, what kind of things will come around. We can mark it here like properly.
Yeah, no, that's what I definitely recommend. I think, but in terms of, but you can't make constructions in Inspector, unfortunately. You have to make in Open Studio and then open the file in SketchUp, and then you can click on the surface and then assign it. So you have to probably that combination of both, because like we talked about last time, here in SketchUp you can see the the geometry and the selected. So because like here you have a drop down menu of like construction, but unless you make in Open Studio, you're not going to see the option available in the drop down menu. But I completely agree. I think this is going to be anything that helps minimize the error, and because this is an example of like kind of the SketchUp tools, which I mean, frankly, I just have not been able to overcome. And I think I must have done the components wrong previously. So thank you. I really, you know, I definitely learned something, and, you know, it's really good to see. And I think Ambika, you know, I think you did a great job showing this live in the demonstration, because it's definitely quite challenging. And I just want to applaud you for that.
Thank you so much. A lot of things, like we can do like any kind of building through it. There will be no error coming with it. Sometimes what happens if we have hip roof, we are not going to calculate like from whole things like from vertical, horizontal. We need to make it inclined or marking inclined for just calculating rightly. So I was just thinking about how we're gonna do it. So yeah. So I tried it.
Well, there's 3 teams that are going to be established to present and create their final project and then present it. And I think I can see that there are 3 teams that are going to be vying for you, Ambika, to be in their team as their SketchUp professional. So you're pretty powerful right now, Ambika.
Thank
So
you.
take advantage of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ambika.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else want to share some of the class before we move on to our other demonstration, our lab 2? Okay, all right. So as I mentioned before, you know, unfortunately we couldn't start lab 2 last week. So, you know, I'm going to talk about it today, and you know, we are going to work on something called a prototype building. So, you know, there are many buildings, you know, across the country in the US, but a lot of them fall in the same sort of category. They're either schools, they're either retail stores, they're office buildings, there's restaurants. So, you know, the Department of Energy at the federal level decided to analyze, you know, for the purpose of energy consumption, that, well, what are some of these categories of buildings? So they came up with, I believe, 17, and this was about in the 90s, 17 prototype buildings, 17 Department of Energy prototype buildings. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen now. And what you actually have is that, you know, the prototype building became the basis of, you know, modeling buildings in the US in general, because the idea is just that these 17, you know, prototypes represent the entire building stock of the country. So when they develop, you know, energy policy or codes, regulations, they will test and evaluate it on these prototype building to roughly approximate the effect, you know, across the entire country. So I'm not going to go on the DOE website and kind of, you know, go through that, but I do want to show you guys, you know, there's a few different ones. And the really powerful aspect of OpenStudio, oh, sorry, I didn't share the screen yet. I just realized. Let me share OpenStudio. Actually, I'm going to share screen because there's a lot to show you guys. Okay, can everyone see my screen now? Okay, so you are nodding. So the very powerful thing about OpenStudio is that you're able to automatically generate these prototype buildings. So I'm going to load a prototype building very quickly. Let's just go ahead and, so I want to show you guys how do you make a prototype building model. I'm just going to quickly. I'm going to go ahead and do a, since I have it open, secondary school, discard. Give it a second. Okay, so this is a prototype building, but how do you generate one automatically? So if you go to components and measures, there is a option in the menu called apply measure now. So, you know, measure really is supposed to stand for energy efficiency measure, energy conservation measure. So a measure is anything that you do, you know, to your model. You change something. But OpenStudio uses a slightly broader definition of measures, is that anything that you do to modify the model. And the developers of OpenStudio have created a bunch of templates, a bunch of default measures that you can use to modify your model. Because, you know, when you're editing the energy model, there are the same few functions that you are using. And these measures are available for download off something called the building component library. So if you go to the building component library, you know, this is a website, bcl.nrel.gov. The website link is on your syllabus. If I, for example, go to prototype buildings, right, you can see that there's a measure. Yeah, this is a measure that helps you, you know, create DOE reference building models as starting points for other analysis. So, you know, you can download this measure, you know, right now, because the way it works, and I'm just going to pull on the hood, is that all of these are just Ruby scripts, because OpenStudio, just like SketchUp, you can script in Ruby. We're not going to script in Ruby in this class, but if you are very, you know, comfortable scripting Ruby, you can definitely unlock a lot more power under the hood for OpenStudio. So all these measures you download are just Ruby scripts, you know, nothing particularly fancy. But what you do is that you do not download off the website. Open your OpenStudio application, go to Components and Measures, and say Find Measures. Actually, I guess before I go to that one, I will. There's also components. The building. So there's an online directory library of these downloadable Ruby scripts, you know, for OpenStudio. There's two main things you can download off there. One of them are measures, which modify your model. The second thing are building components, pieces like materials or building equipment, because that's why it's called the building component library. So before we were talking about, you know, I was making that window, right? So for example, if I didn't want to make my own window, for example, I could have gone to the building component library here and then, you know, choose one of these things and then just download it to say, oh, 189.1, non-residential 4B, let's find something 4A. You know, so I'll just do it. Non-swing door. I right click it, and you can see on the right hand side that these are the attributes of this, you know, component, and I can just click download. After I download it, and I want to give it a second. There's a couple of questions. Yes, you need a building authorization key. So if you do that, you know, if you see on your syllabus, you know, and it's my fault for neglecting to mention it, you know, go to BCL and register for an account. You create an account, and after you create an account, you log in. They will give you a key. You just copy and paste it. I'll be honest, I do not remember my key because all I do nowadays is just I just save my key on my hard drive. So I frankly do not remember. Yeah, so the key is an API key. It's just a string of characters, and so I just save it on my computer because I never remember my BCL password, and that's the only thing I use it for. So I just I just copy and paste my my key in OpenStudio, and then this unlocks the window. If you go to the OpenStudio workshop manual, there are some screenshots showing you, you know, how the screen looks like, which I'm not going to go into today because we're short on time. So you can download materials, you know, but very, very, very importantly, and unfortunately we are short on time, so I'm going to go through that. Is you can also download a measure, and the most important measure that when I look at is it's called the Create DOE Prototype Buildings, reference buildings. No, I already. Yeah, Create DOE Prototype Building. So I already have it downloaded, but there's an update, so I'm just going to download and update that really quick. Just give it a few seconds. And what I want to do is I want to run this measure and show you what it looks like. So when you apply measure, what they're always going to do is prompt you to, well, all right, this screen pops up. I'm going to go to create BOE prototype building. And here there's a couple of options I have to choose. What building type? And these are the 17 building types that we have. In this case, this is a secondary school. I'm just going to say secondary school. And what template do you build on? I'm going to make this building LEED version 3, so 90.1 2007. Let's keep it in New York City. Climate zone 4A. Apply measure. Yeah, this is going to take about, depending on how powerful your computer is, because all this is doing is that it downloads that, it's running that Ruby script, and that Ruby script is the one drawing all the geometry for you instead of you doing it manually. So it does take a little bit of time, and you know, if it takes too long, I'm going to cancel because I already did this, and I have the prototype building downloaded on my. Okay. I really do want to run it for you guys. Okay, while it runs in the background, I'm going to show you what it looks like. So I pulled up, this is what the secondary school prototype building looks like in Open Studio. Okay, so if you look at it, everything is fully fleshed out. It has there are schedules, there are spaces. You know, there's already constructions, I believe, because they inherited. So that's what all the templates are. It's still running. Okay. You know, I'm just going to cancel it because we're short on time. All right, just craft a program. That's not good. So your assignment for Lab 2 is really simple. I'm going to upload to Blackboard several DOE prototype buildings, reference types, and as you can see, I already have them, you know, ready. I might put a few more for you guys to choose. There's some very simple ones, and there's some very complicated ones. I think I might leave 3 for you to choose, and I'm going to give you all of you the choice. You can choose whichever 3 you want, and then after you, there's a chat question. Yeah, you know, Jessica, sometimes it takes them some time to send you a key. I keep trying to reset my password, and I never get their emails for some reason. It's very strange. You know, I would just, you know, be patient, and if not, you know, we can definitely work it out. I can share you my key. Sometimes there are troubles for people using the same key, so I avoid doing that. But you know, in a pinch, we can definitely do that as well. But okay, so your assignment for Lab 2 is really simple. You know, you're going to take one of the Open Studio models that I'm going to post on Blackboard, all right? And you're going to run the energy model, all right? And I'm going to show you very, very importantly. When you run this energy model, there's something else okay, I'm going to need to wait for Open Studio to load. Is that make sure you have what measure, you know, on, and that's the Open Studio results. So, you know, you should already have under reporting QA/QC, there's a measure downloadable from BCL called Open Studio Results. So you just have to drag it in. All right, make sure that, you know, it's in, and then run your model. I'm going to keep talking while the model runs because you know, last week I ran the energy model simulation, and it showed a bunch of numbers about what the energy consumption is, right? Those were Energy Plus results, and they were very simple. There was a bunch of tables, a lot of text, but the Open Studio measures is it's a Ruby script again, and it creates a really nice HTML file with lots of beautiful graphs and lots of beautiful graphs and charts that tells you about, you know, what the result of your energy model is. And I want to spend a couple of minutes here to, okay, unfortunately, I might have to kill this too, because this is just, you know, gonna take too long. You know, I'm gonna show a much lighter model and run the demonstration for you guys. You know what? Let's do a super simple. Yeah, let's do different ones. Simplest model I have. I guess this one. Okay, I think this one's pretty simple. Because I really want to show you guys what it looks. So, okay, so for lab 3, I want you to choose one of the 3 or 4 models I'm going to post on the website. I want you to run the energy model, look at the energy results, all right? And then I want you to go back and change one element. Change either something in the materials, you know, in the construction, or you can change the schedule. Don't change HVAC. There's nothing, you know, we're not doing that right now. And then rerun the energy model. And then and for your homework assignment is, you know, you have to write 1 page, up to 1 page. Tell me what your findings are. What did you modify? What do you see what to change? All right. I'm going to post on Blackboard, you know, the exact what I just described, so you have a reference for that. Okay. So if you, you know, are not sure what it is, you can read it on Blackboard. I think the instructions are straightforward. And, but as part of that assignment, you're going to need a couple of skills. You need to learn how to modify elements in your energy model. 2, you need access to the building component library. And 3, you need to know how to run the energy model. So, and I think over the course of the past 2-3 weeks, you've been slowly building that skill set. And let me try to run the model a while, and then we can talk. I can answer the question really quickly. Okay. I think this model runs. It might be Fatal, if not in a different one. Okay, perfect. Oh, okay, yeah, Professor Bryce. Yeah, so please upload it, you know, on Blackboard. That's where you can submit the. So I'm not asking for a lot, I think, because I really just want you guys to start using OpenStudio and learning how to modify an element and looking at the actual energy modeling and simulation part. The write-up is just kind of a way for you, you know, to force you guys to think about how do you communicate what you find. I don't really, frankly, the assignment is not about what you know, find. I just really want to see what, you know, you have evaluated and what you are thinking, and for you to start considering what aspects, you know, you find challenging to use in OpenStudio. Due date for Lab 2. You know, the goal of Lab 2, I would say, is, you know, next week, next Thursday. You know, I think because as soon as the class is over, I will maybe give me about less than an hour. Because I want to think about which prototype buildings I want to upload. I have 3 or 4 ready. I might pick different ones. So I'm going to post those models, you know, tonight, and then and also I'm going to give the assignment write up, you know, so you guys can reference it. I couldn't find a Word document I had it on, so I might just have to rewrite a new one. So I think 1 week is, you know, should be sufficient, you know. And you know, you can pick any of the 3 models. They're going to be about the same complexity, not the most complex models, but not the most simple ones. It's definitely going to be more complex than the 12 space, you know, model that I was drawing and looking at last week. Yeah, you can download the prototype building from Blackboard. You can just do that. You can absolutely download the measure from Building Component Library and do it as well yourself. You know, if you choose, you know, I would not be opposed to that. But you know, if you run into issues, you know, I think that's really well, frankly, you're going to need BCL access anyway, because you're not going to get this OpenStudio result. So you can see that this model is more complicated, so it's going to take a minute or 2 to run instead of like the 10 seconds our other models have been. And right now we're literally halfway through the year. You know, so this model is successful, it's going to run, and I think we just have about 2 minutes to you know, to look at the charts really quick. So does anyone have any questions about what I expect from you? And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I just realized that my email was not on this version of syllabus, but it's on Blackboard. You can see what, you know, my email address on CUNY one, or you can do my personal one that some of you already know. So happy to answer questions on that. But, you know, to be very honest, the purpose of Lab 2 is to make sure you guys start using Open Studio. That's really the most important part. I think, you know, for the purpose of Lab 2, you don't technically need to use SketchUp, but, you know, if you like to, I think it's a very helpful aid for you to visualize the model. Okay, is it? Open Studio and Sketch keeps crashing for me. Ooh, that's that could be a lot of different questions. So it could be your computer graphics. You might need to update some of the graphics driver. You know, that might be one reason why. The other, I think that typically sometimes that fix it, or it could be corrupted file. You might have to uninstall and reinstall. I think those are the two main tips I usually have. Okay. More questions. I think the model's almost done. Maybe another 30 seconds, and then after I show you guys the model result, we're going to end the class.
Alvis, how much of a change are you expecting within the model? Like, could we just change like one element of the schedule and
absolutely.
See what? Okay.
Absolutely. Because like, look, you know, this is not your final project. You know, the point is just that whatever change you make, tell me what the change you made and, you know, why you were considering it. For example, if you're changing the insulation of something, you can say like, hey, I want to swap out R8 insulation for R30 insulation or R20. And then you say, oh, why? You know, and then like, how come? What were the difference, for example? Or you can say like, oh, I'm going to take out half the windows. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to take out half the single pane windows and put in double pane windows. What are you going to see? And if you're very clever, you don't have to do a lot of work because you can just download stuff off building component library and then swap it in. I'm not opposed to that. You know, I just want you guys to start using Open Studio and tell me, you know, what sort of changes you want to make for one element. Because like these models are more complicated. They're going to have mechanical equipment, HVAC equipment. They're going to have windows. They're going to have doors. They're going to have spaces. Some of them have interior walls. So, you know, there's going to be more sophisticated lighting, actually, like different types of lighting, different schedules. So there's a lot of choice to pick from. And it's very important for you to understand that energy modeling is you're the modeler. You have to make a lot of choices. Okay, so the model is done running, so completed. It took 4 minutes and 8 seconds. So when you go to the last screen, the report summary, the result summary, you see this beautiful HTML file, and you can actually download it. Actually, you can share this one. So this one is not so pretty because I realized that there's not a lot of details. But you can see that for your final presentation or for your other assignment when you use Open Studio, you have so much information that you can just pull into a PowerPoint slide, right? You have charts, you have tables. This one does not have a very pretty pie charts, but you know, a lot of times, see, unfortunately, everything here is 0. But under energy use and end use, you're supposed to see, you know, let me actually open one up. I told you guys that you can, let's see a poem from last year, HVAC. Demo, run, nope, this one doesn't have it. Yeah, let me show you guys what the actual report. Oh gosh, there we go. So yeah, it's just an HTML file, and you can see that there are these very, very attractive looking charts that tell you the breakdown of the energy consumption, UI by different, end uses. There are these beautiful tables and charts. There's a tremendous amount of information that you can use for presenting to clients. Now, technically, you can customize it. I'm not going to tell you how to customize it. It's really just HTML editing. But you can see the beauty and the reason why we're telling you to use Open Studio is that, the visualization and the presentation of results is far superior to the default Energy Plus. So this is what Energy Plus spits out. But Open Studio, when you use that Open Studio results measure, gives you so much more data and information that's very, very visually attractive. Okay. For more detail on this, report and what I just ran through, please refer to the Open Studio Workshop Manual.pdf. There's a whole section that kind of goes through this. So, unfortunately, I did not spend as much time on this right now as I would like to, but I think we had a really wonderful presentation today, and we had a lot of detail, a lot of input from everyone. We had a lot of great questions, so I do appreciate the way we spent the time. But I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's almost 9, it's 9:14 already. I think so. I would say the class is dismissed. Don't forget to take attendance. But if you have any last questions, I will stay on to answer a couple of questions, and then afterwards I'll post everything on Blackboard.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Wait, quick question. Should we run the model first before we make changes, just so we know like what the changes will look like for ourselves? Or?
Yes, absolutely. Because that's what you want to do. Like I said, before you make any modification to your model, please save a new copy. Save your model, that's not change, then make a change, then save a new version, or more like save a new version, then make the change, then save, because otherwise you're gonna have a hard time keeping track.
Okay, and we're only doing one version, right? Or one change? Or comparing
you can do as many changes as you like. I only want to hear about, I'm only requiring you to do one. If you want to change the materials and the schedules, go ahead. But, I would say the bare minimum is one. And because the goal of this exercise is for you guys to practice and work. And the more you do, it's for your own benefit.
Yeah, you know how in the beginning, how you said we had to cancel something out first before we make any changes?
That prototype building should not have that issue.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I don't know if
that's a great question. So, I have Bob's apartment open, not the. So I'm going to open up the prototype buildings again, and then we can take a quick look and see. So you can look that you should not have this problem. I'm going to do this other prototype. This building is super simple. So, so you can see on loads. Well, I lied. It's actually a combination. They have both. They have some elements that were not inherited as. So for this one, you see on the facilities type, there is no space type at the facilities level, but there is a space type associated with the reference building type. But here.
So if we go to constructions and make changes, would we be allowed to?
Yes, because right now this has not been assigned a default construction set. But here, my point is this: even for space type here, you can just exit out. Or so you. I need to stop, moving so fast. The construction set you might have to X out of, but the space and schedule set you do not.
Okay, so if we, let's say this happens, right? And we X out the construction set, we would note that in our change, right?
Yeah.
Because would that change? I don't know if that would change.
I would say that change doesn't count, but I mean.
No, I mean just to note in case it does have unintended changes,
Yeah, well, I mean, the way I look at it is that, think of it as a journal entry for yourself, for your first experience working with Open Studio. So, unfortunately, you're right. I think the construction does. What I could do is before I upload to Blackboard, I could just take them off. For make everyone's life easier. The reason I leave them on is so that you guys can see this is what a properly built energy model looks like. I think that's kind of the purpose of that. But it's almost like a little Easter egg. And when you go back to our lecture recording, and when you go to the manual, you can see that you are supposed to remove these issues. Yeah, the space. Yeah, you see, like when I click on the space types and I go to the right, I exit, top right. You see, this gets removed because this is not set at the facility level. It's a really good exercise because this tells you that you need to look 3 different places just to change one thing. You can control the constructions at the space type level, at the space level, and the facility level. And you can see that you have to know where to look because it's a choice which one you want to set. If my building has 12 spaces, I'm going to do it at the space level. But if my building have 1,200 spaces, I probably will not do it at the space level. At minimum, I might do it at the space type level, because then I might only have 12 space types. Let's say 10 space types. Then I have to do it 10 times. I don't have to do it 1,200 times. So it's about how much time you have to do a certain task. But these are great questions, Jessica. Keep them coming.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
And Bika, do you have anything else to add? Because I see you nodding along, but do you have any questions or thoughts?
No, not yet. I was just listening.
Tanya, I see you're not mute. Okay, never mind. You're on mute. Okay.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
I remember you guys said earlier that you were going to split us up into the groups. I mean, I know that's not for this lab, but.
Yeah, we will do that. When we start working on the final project. And we're not quite there yet. Can we make our own groups? Can we make a decision on that at a later date?
Elvis, I was speaking with Jessica during the office hour before this class, and I think that a very good way to do this, normally when we're in class, we would do it a little bit more involvement, but I would really like you to try to put your groups together with various partners who have different specialties. So, Ambika is going to be very much in demand for the SketchUp aspect of it, but there's the open studio aspect of it as well, the video presentation aspect of it, and some others. But I would like to recommend, because I'm trying to really enforce that we try to use the social aspect of this class as much as we can, that you actually go to WhatsApp and have a dialogue there with all of your fellow classmates, and try and see if you can put together a very diversified team, so you don't have 3 SketchUp experts in one team. Try to diversify it. I think it's okay, Professor Yoon, if we let them give it a try, and if they have a problem, if it's becoming too difficult for you, then we can step in. But in person, in the lab, on campus, we would help you out with that. But I think that I think you're very capable and would benefit from the socialization aspect of trying to do it in WhatsApp. So unless anybody has any major complaint about that, I would like to give that a try at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a ton of sense, Professor Bryce. And I mean, just from our experience, I think it's always more beneficial for the groups to be more diverse, because when you have someone who's an expert on lighting, and then you have an expert on HVAC, and then you have someone who's a little more better background in architecture and drawing, and then maybe someone who's very good about presentations and visualizations. I think that's always very helpful. So because that just becomes a richer experience because you learn from each other, and so I think it's to your benefit. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Everything that Professor Bryce just mentioned as you are putting together your group. But yeah, that sounds like a great idea to me. But Bob, when do we want to make a choice, or do we want them to make some proposals to us first in the next couple of weeks, and then we affirm them?
Yeah, I think that's fine. We can give it our blessing, or we can try to move some people around, or it's very possible that some of the people in the class are not happy with the team that they're in for whatever reason, and they
Yeah.
might want to come to us privately and say, look, I really need for
Yeah.
this, that, or the other reason to get
Mhm.
swapped into another team.
Yeah,
We-
or like their schedule might align better, and we find out over time. So I think, yeah, start. You're right. I think let's have them start socializing, and then we don't have to make a final decision, as an entire class until a later date, right?
Yeah, and then we can talk about it. But I think you're kind of getting an idea now where we're going with this project. And Professor Yoon added some other categories. If you like lighting, then by all means, be the lighting expert in your group. And as we proceed in the presentations, you will get a better understanding and a handle on the final project, as well as obviously using Open Studio.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, I'm not. I actually like it when every student tries to touch on everything because I feel like you learn more. But I think it does help the group when someone has, the background of, different categories, because then, it really adds to, the model and, and makes a better product and presentation for us, at least.
Yeah, I may have misspoke there. Just because you're an expert in SketchUp, for example, doesn't mean that you will not be helping your fellow teammates on other portions of it. But somebody can be a leader in each group for each segment of that group, and you may need some help too in whatever you're an expert on. So yeah, we don't want you to just do the one thing and that's it. Professor Young is absolutely correct. We want you to get a good experience to everything, but you can be a master of one project, one portion of it, and an assistant to another master on another portion of the project.
All right, good night. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Elvis.
I think that wraps it up. So I'm going to stop it here, and I'll try to post this recording early tomorrow by the time it gets processed. So good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.